now that I've got this on here, I said I was going to use my 6-point crosshair square. And so what I'm going to be doing is finding that dead center. And I apologize, I know there's a little bit of glare there, but I'm going to find that dead center on there. And I am going to have my lines going side to side here. And then obviously these go at 60-degree increments. So I'm going to get that placed on there just perfect, or close to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw these in. And I'm just using a pencil. And then I'm going to rotate it so that I can get the lines that go exactly in between there. So I'm going to find that center again. And I'm going to lay my etched lines, which you probably can't see, but there's one there and there's one there. And now these lines I am going to dash or get a different color of pencil. Because anything that you can do to make this so that they're differentiated will make it easier. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, that's a big opening there. How do I know I'm getting right in the center? Well, I think you can probably tell that I kind of have my pencil at an angle. So that way the edge right here is resting on this so that it will go down the center of that spacing. So now that I've got those lines there, I have my 60-degree wedges and I have the spacing in between there. Now, I know for a fact that this is not going to be long enough, so I'm going to take these right now and go ahead and extend the solid ones. So I'm just measuring right here to the center, the line I've already drawn, and just extending those out because I'm going to be working clear out. Like I said, it would be 12 inches from the center because it's going to be a 24-inch design. And I will tell you, it's kind of tough for me to keep it. I try to work as hard as I can, but I try to have a space that I can always draw in so that I've got a big enough space to work in here. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to be using the 7.5 of the Spinifex 16. Now this is the Spinifex 16 set right here. It has 5 different sizes in it. Today I'm going to be using the 7.5, 5.5, and 3.5. So the 3 of the smallest ones, the 3 smallest ones there. And so I'm going to get that template as the 7.5. And you can see it's kind of a different shape than we have used before. But if you refer back to this design here, you will notice that I have this so it's kind of spinning out of itself. This design here is one design, but it's not completed. So that's why I needed to draw these lines, these other lines, because that's where I'm going to be starting when I draw this, or that's where I'm going to be stopping when I draw this. And the way I found that out was to draw those 12 lines, lay this template down and draw it complete around here and see where that intersection happened. And in this case, it just so happens it's right there on that line. So that makes it easy enough. Now, let's say it wasn't at that point. So I'm just going to guess. Let's say when I drew that, it was like maybe right here. What am I going to do? Well, that's where I'm just going to put an arrow sticker, one of my arrow stickers, so I know where I'm going to stop that design. Now, this particular design on the solid lines is where I'm going to line up my straight out of the top and my center down here. So I'm going to line up this bottom and this top. All right. So what do we need to actually draw on paper? Rather than just sitting this here and drawing, we need what's called a stitching line disc. And stitching line discs come 8 in a package, 4 different sizes, 2 of each size. Now these 2 here happen to be the same size. Here's one that's got the little tiny hole, and honestly, even my sharpened pencil will not fit down into that. So this is the size I'm going to be using. You can use even like up to Sharpie pen size. They come with a larger hole. So I use mostly this one that's the second to the smallest. It's the one I use the most. I keep them sitting over here beside my space where I draw so that if for some reason I need a different size, I've got it right handy. So what this does for us is this is the same size as the foot. So in other words, it's a 1/2 inch from side to side, 1/4 of an inch to the outer edge from the needle. My pencil becomes my needle and my lead becomes my thread. So now when I come down here to the center with everything lined up like it's supposed to be, when I draw, I'm just coming out here and around. And as I said, I'm going to stop on that dashed line. And then I'm going to return back to the beginning. Now, would I need to do that when I'm drawing? No. But you might as well practice what you're going to be doing, because that's the way you're going to stitch it. You're going to start in the middle, go out to here, and come back to the middle. Then we're going to rotate. We're going to leave that right there, just as if this was what we were doing when we were stitching. And I'm going to rotate this around to that spot. I'm going to hold this right in place, making sure I've got the dead center. And we're going to go around. And we're going to come right over here to where that other one is. And back in so that they touch right there. Now, it's all the same from here on out. Line that up. Line it up over on the side. Stitch to where it touches. And come back. We're lining up on solid lines. And you can do this same type of thing with any of your Spinifex templates and with many of the others also, where you get this look of that it spins or rotates out of itself rather than overlapping like we normally have it. Now you can see right there, I've got just a little bit of space. Probably in reality, you would not have that, because if you can see, my little pencil lead does not take up all of that space. So sometimes it doesn't go exactly where it's meant to go. But if that were the case, obviously you could come back and take a couple stitches in there, but you'll notice that that's right on that line there. So that's the first part of our design. And now when I'm designing, I want you to know how you can go back and read this later, because the last thing you want to do is get this all designed and then have to figure out, what in the world did I just do? Well, first of all, I usually write over on the side here, and you can't even see it. It's so far over there. So I'll pull this in. But over here on the side, I usually write down what template I used. And then this one right here, this was the 7.5. So I'm just going to put that right there so that I know that that was my 7.5 template. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to make some arcs to connect this. So I am going to be using what is called the outer rim tool. Now, I know I've shown this before, but maybe not on here, and maybe you've never seen it. But the outer rim tool is so useful. I'm just going to tell you, before I knew what I was doing with it, I would never have said that. But now that I know how to use it, it is very, very useful. So I'm going to put it on this paper, this cardboard here, so you maybe can see it a little bit better. When I instruct, I have people put a green arrow pointing towards the flat end of their outer rim tool. And I have them put a blue arrow on the other end. And the reason that I do this is it makes it easier when you're teaching. So if you're wondering why blue, why green, well, that's why, and you don't have to do it at all if you don't want to. But there are holes in the center here. And if I was using this like a compass, let's just say I needed to draw a circle. I could say, okay, I want to draw a 6-inch circle. Here is the number 6. So I'm just going to lay that number 6 down. And on the rounded end, there's a hole. So all I have to do is draw my 6-inch circle. You've done this many times with a compass. That's what that's like. Now, the other end being flat, if I needed to draw, let's say, a 7-inch marking where it was going to be away from the center, 7 means that from side to side is 7 inches. So from here to the end is 3.5. So when I teach, I would put this as 7 with a slash and then 3.5 like that. Because if you're using a ruler, you got to measure out 3.5. But if I have this, all I got to do is wherever I need it, I just rotate it. And I can get my lines a whole lot faster than having to measure out 3.5 inches from the center. So that's the two ends, how they work. And I will tell you that when you're measuring with this, you're going to use the numbers on the left side. So if I'm working with this end, I'm using the numbers on this side. If I'm working with this end, I'm using the numbers on this side. These numbers are different than these numbers over here. And for that reason, I want to make a line from the center. So I'm just taking my thumbtack that's on a piece of tape, putting that right in the center. And I need these lines to be only on my solids. Okay, my solid line here, that's the only place that I need them. And this particular one is going to be 5 3/4 from the center. So I need to make it 11.5. So I'm going to find the 11.5 mark here. And I'm going to go out to that edge and make a mark. I'm going to come to the next solid line and make a mark. So I think you can see how easy that is rather than having to measure all of those. So I've got my marks just simply by rotating that around. Now I'm going to make a second mark because the design that I'm getting ready to do, I can do the first part using these marks and immediately do the second part using another mark. And that way I won't have to stop and change or measure. So this particular one should be 14 inches from side to side. So that means on this side, I find the 7. You can see that right there. And I put that, not the 7, the 14, because it's going to be out that far. So I'm going to bring it out here and put it on the 14, which means it's 14 from side to side. I'll pull this up a little so you can see it here. Get that right on that line. And so now on my drawing, I'm just going to put a little number right here. I think you remember on this one, we did this at 11.5, and we did this one at 14. And that just saves me later on having to figure out what those numbers are, because in my designing, this is what I'm working with. Now, this next step, we're going to use one of our templates from our sampler set 1, and that's the spiral template. And we're going to be coming from this point to this point, out to this point, back to this point. And so if we're doing that, and we're going to continue on, if I start here, I just made it difficult for myself. So I'm going to start right there. So I'm going to take my spacing gauge, center it right at that spot, and hook my template around it, but I sure don't need that thumbtack anymore. Oh, right up here. And I'm going to come over to this spot, but I need to measure that. And this is a little tricky when you've got all your hands full, but we got to measure that so it's 1/4 of an inch. And so now I will connect that. I'm going to then just put this template up there. I'm going to eyeball what I think is 1/4 of an inch here first. And then I'm going to measure it. It was a little bit off. But if you eyeball it and get it pretty well lined up, it makes it easier. So let me get it on the screen there. Get this right in there. Measure. And I will tell you, this spiral template is so handy. And I was all but afraid of it when I first started doing template quilting. Why? I do not know, because it gives you the coolest designs. So we're coming down here. You probably are wondering why I have so many arrows on my spiral. Well, those are just places that I use a lot when I'm working with designs. And so those actually mean something to me. They probably don't mean a thing to you at this point. But you can see what I'm doing is I'm coming from these points back into the dips of what I created before, because basically my whole goal here is to take a design and enlarge it to fit a space or a project. And in this case, you're going to be surprised when I show you my project. I've got one more here to do. And in drawing, you also want to do as much as you can without stopping and starting. In other words, it doesn't matter that I'm stopping and starting, but what will be stopping and starting with thread. So as you can see, this is where I started. And I'm coming back to that same spot. And the next part of the design is just basically a larger echo. I'm going to be coming from here out to there. So I'm still in the same spot. So I don't have to break my thread, tie off, unless you wanted to change colors. So we're going to go out to this spot right here. And notice when I'm measuring, and I'm not measuring on that line, I'm measuring to where it touches my template. So it's a flat around there. It's not like you just take this any old angle you want. You want this flat side here right against the flat part of your template. So I'm coming out to there. And I'm going to bring it right back down into this spot right here. And I can tell you, when you're working on paper like this, you'll come up with a whole lot more creativity than you would if you just sat down and started sewing on your fabric. Because for one thing, when you're on your fabric, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't make a mistake because I sure don't want to have to bring and take any of this out. So it just makes it so much easier because I am using pencils so that if I need to, I erase. And I will just tell you, the best thing you can do is go get you one of those pink erasers. You've had them before, and that way you will be able to erase easily. And that's kind of the reason I don't use as many colored pencils, because of the fact that they don't erase as easily. Now, I will say that I have before, even on the one I think I showed you, used whiteout. So if you've got something that you just really don't even want to take the time, you can get your whiteout out. Now you can see I'm just kind of guesstimating, not going measuring every single time, but because it's a drawing, it will give us what we need. So there's my spot out there. I'm pretty close to it. Turn this around. And when I'm stitching this, I may even be turning my fabric, rotating the whole fabric. One more here. Your spiral template, if you don't know, is used both ways. And so you would want to put stable tape on both sides of your spiral template, because we could use it this way, whatever is the easiest. So that you can see more of that design. Now the question was, could you do this on some sort of a vinyl or whatever? And yes, and I wish I could tell you the name of it. It's on my website. This comes in a reel, and you can lay this out and draw right on this with whiteboard markers. And so I've got a couple of them here. I'll just show you. If I had drawn this out, and this is where that, see how thick that is? This is where one of those larger ones might have, been. Let me see if I can find a darker one, because I do use this. There we go. And I know Sew Steady has some of those. I have 3 different colors, I think. And the whole idea of this is, you can see you wouldn't have to do it twice. You could actually just draw on this. But it has up at this edge a black line up here and at the bottom, so that it is clear. So that tells you, you're not going to go off the edge when you do that. But let's see if I move this over. I don't think you can probably see that as well as I can, but it's showing up pretty good right there for me. So anyway, yes, you can do this. And, I wish I could tell you the name of this. But it comes in a roll. I think it's like $12 for the roll. I'll have to let Mike know about what it is and see if he can get it on there for you guys to be able to get. So it does allow you to do that. You can also use your Sew Steady table for that. You can draw right on your table with those markers that are available from Sew Steady, and then put your fabric underneath it. So great question. So what's next? This is pretty, but it needs something else. It's got to have more than just that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a design up in this area, and I'm going to do a design over here, but this is going to be a large design, and this one is going to be a smaller design. So I'm going to fold this just a little bit here so that you can see what we're going to be doing. I don't usually fold like that, but this will work perfect. So I'm going to take this and put this into this spot. because the center out here is 8 inches away from what my center is. So I'm going to use my outer rim tool, and I'm putting it on 16 because it's always half of what you're doing out here. So here is 8. And I can't remember if the side are 8 also. Let me look here a second and then I'll know. Yes. So then what I'm going to be doing is on this one over here. And I want you to see how it's like, okay, where do I put it? There's no line in here. There wasn't a line there either. I put it straight on this line right like this. And you'll see I've got to come back and put a place in there to draw from. So I'm off, I see. Okay, there we go. I'll just rotate this so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So I matched it up right in here, came out and made this line and then made this straight line. We're in the open spaces. Straight out through there. All right. So now that I have those drawn, what I need to do is use my 6-point crosshair square so that I can get this at the correct markings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the center here with the center down here. So I'm just going from center to center, and you'll see why here in just a moment. And I apologize that it's so big. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to use these two because I'm not going to get into the geometry of it, you guys, because that you would turn me off. Mike would be frustrated at me because I just totally turned you guys off. But when I did those lines, knowing that I want one going straight up that way, can you see how this actually matches right on those lines I drew? So there's my center. This was the line that I drew headed over here to this side. This was the line I drew there. And I've got my straight up out of there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So that's where I'm going to make the next design. Now I'm only doing that in every other one. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to skip this one. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So it's coming straight out this direction. So this lays right on there. And then I would come, skip the next one, come to this one. Open space. Ooh, I almost drew it on the wrong one. And I'm going to lay this in here like this. This points right back to the center. This lays right on those lines. This is the dead center here. So these are going to be the lines that I use. Now on this particular size, I am using the 5.5. So let's find that 5.5 and a stitching line disc. And this time I'm going all the way around, so I won't be retracing, which for one thing will tell you this is going to stand out because this has been stitched twice here. Those have all been stitched twice. So these, and when you see me kind of struggle there and go back on it, it's only because I'm going, I remember I taped some pieces of paper together, so they're kind of not liking each other, and there's a piece of tape there. That's why that hesitated. Let's get right in here. I'm just coming back because it didn't do it on that tape. There's so many things I could show you to do with this particular template. I'm going to show you a couple of them, but it's really a very, very useful template and versatile. And for those of you that were in my Next Steps class, we used one of the sizes of this one. So there you can see our design, what we're going to be doing. I'm going to come over here. We'll do this one. I probably won't do the third one because you got the idea and the hang of it. Because I would rather take the time to show you a couple of other things and some other things that you can do with the template, because we got a lot to show you with the stitching. There are honestly times when this is about all that I do prior to even teaching a class, because this gives me all of my instructions that I'm going to need. Plus, I have worked out the stops and starts and overlaps and all of that kind of thing just by doing the drawing part. And again, these would be fun ones for template quilting because of the way they overlap. Now, this one would be the same way because we do 3 of them. And then this one right here is done with the 3.5. So it's just the little one. So I'm going to take this little tiny one here. And when it says 3.5, just so you know, this said 5.5 for this one. So that means from here to here, it's 5.5. It's a 5.5 design. So it would fit in a 6-inch square. So on this one right here, I can't just start drawing. I've got to do the same thing again. So I'm going to take my 6-point crosshair square. I'm going to lay it on there. I'm going to line up so that this goes back to center. I just like to have several ways of lining up the design. So knowing that, this here was going to make my hexagon, that was one of the reasons I did that. Let me come around here and do one of the other ones. Oh, I didn't draw it out here. It's over here. I was in the wrong place. I use those ruler stickers for a lot of things, not just even in ruler work. If I'm cutting something out for a quilt and I need a bunch of them, I just definitely mark my cutting template with those so that I know where I'm headed. This is where I have to kind of backtrack a bit because of my extra paper. So you can see how cute that little one is compared to a big one like this. I've chalked it in. Ignore that line. That's not a good line. And we are now going to take and put in those lines in between. So I'm going to line up that center. There we go. I was going to say I got something off here. And I'm just going to do my little hash marks. And the thing that's fun about having, if this were actually those pieces, I wouldn't even have to make these marks. Well, these I would, but I wouldn't have made these because those are seams. So I really don't have to do anything at all with those. So now we started with the 7.5. And remember, we did the solid lines to the etch line. So I'm going to pull this over. I've got my green grid glider on there. I've got my machine set up for ruler work. And we're going to pull that thread up from the center there. I'm going to put the needle down in the center, and we're going to line up here and line up back there behind. And remember, I'm only stitching, whoa, you can tell I was doing something else before because that was too fast. I'm only stitching to there, and then I'm coming back. I'm going to rotate to the next solid line. I will stitch till it touches and come back. Now, some of you are probably like, she went like a little stitch farther. I certainly did. And guess what? I'm not going to worry one bit about it because it's probably on a fabric that you can't tell it anyway. You just have to keep yourself reminded that you're going to be stopping there. You may even want to put a sticker there as a cautionary sign. And the hardest thing for me is to keep in focus that I'm going this way first, because when I was back there, it was that way, which is the same way, but it was upside down. And as I said, obviously we're doing this twice because we want to get back to the beginning. Everything's landing on the floor just like normal. So here, what you can do, let me pull this down. This is where it is going to pass by. And this is just a little hint as what you can do. That's way more than 1/4 of an inch. So I can make it 1/4 of an inch. And when I get up to here, then I can pull this back and come over, or I could just leave it because it's going to come to that point anyway. So I'm going to see what I can do this way. You really just want to leave it because otherwise you won't get right back onto this. No one is ever going to really know the difference. Even though this is over just a little bit, when we get these other lines in here, it's really not going to be noticeable at all. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tie this one. It's the only one I'm going to tie because this is a sample. But I know some of you need to know how to tie these threads. So I'm using a side threading needle. I am going to bring up my bobbin thread by lifting up the foot, pulling this out, putting this foot back down, needle back down, and this time it will actually bring up that bobbin thread. And so at this point, I always let go of it, and that's not what I want to do. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to cut my needle thread. And so now all I have on top are my 2 threads I began with and the 2 threads I ended with. And I just kind of take them and loop them around, pull them through, use the point in the loop. So put the point in the loop, pull that down. My knot's about 1/4 of an inch away from the surface, and that's what I want, so that I can then put that in there and bury those threads. So now, after I pull these tails through, I'm just going to pop that knot right inside there and then cut these threads so that that knot is buried and you have a nice looking starting and stopping.